Sweta, why don't we just piggyback off that story? That's going to be one of the risks moving forward, isn't it? I mean, you have about the time you think you've got it licked, suddenly there can be an uptick just because of imported cases, people traveling to your community and stuff. How do you handle that?
Sure. So we're still looking at this trajectory, and we're trying to understand where we fall along the curve. And we've been hearing a lot about flattening this curve and why all of these measures have come into place around the world and then here in the United States. But we can't really tell where we are along this curve until we get the diagnostic testing in. And that is still somewhere the U.S. is really lagging in compared to a lot of the other epicenters that have already reached their peak and are potentially on their way down the curve. And so that means that the disease is under control. So whether or not these new cases being imported in are going to enhance the curve or change the curve or increase the peak or delay the peak or move up the peak, these are all questions that are still really up in the air until we're able to get those diagnostics really rolled out through the American public.
And Sweta, the other thing we saw earlier this week, these airports just clogged with people going through customs. All I can imagine is just more and more of that infection spreading. And really, I guess, today Donald Trump saying he's a war president. You heard Emmanuel Macron talking about going to war against this disease. But in any war, you have to know who you're fighting and how many there are. And it seems like in the West, they really haven't gotten this where South Korea and China did.
That's right. And it's as if we're going to war with an invisible enemy, which is basically what this is. And I am wary of calling this a war in the sense that war is something where the other side wanted to start something with you, potentially, or is defending themselves. And remember, this is a virus that emerged because we interacted with it, not just this particular virus, but viruses in the past. If you look at MERS from the Arabian Peninsula, if you look at Ebola from Africa, these are all viruses that we, because of human behavior, saw come into emergence. And because we knew that they were going to come into emergence, we could have been better prepared for it. We could have been much more proactive about having our protocols in place and having the resources ready for not if but when this virus or any future virus is bound to emerge. That's something as a infectious disease community we know and we're very aware of. So really, ultimately, it's a war against the virus, of course, and to reduce transmissibility and mortality rates, but it's also a war with our own complacency. We really need to make sure that we are not negligent of the reality of the risks that are around us and that we are prepared for not when, not if, but when they emerge.
Early on here in the United States, I think in the West in general, everyone was talking about these so-called draconian measures instituted by China. But I heard a doctor in the UK just the other day say they aren't draconian, they are essential. And we're seeing more and more states actually taking these steps. The quarantining, the shutting down of businesses, all of these sorts of steps to try and mitigate what we're seeing.
And that makes sense if they're put in early enough. But once the virus is out, then at that point, all we can really hope to do is make the severity of impact less. And so we're playing catch up again. We're kind of racing against the virus, which is already out in the population in the United States. It's making its way through communities and states. And we're hoping that these measures will have some sort of benefit. But my concern is that it will probably have marginal benefit. If historical outbreaks are any indication, then ultimately these types of quarantines and isolations and social distancing measures are a little too late. That being said, they're better than nothing, but we need complete adherence for that marginal benefit to even come into place. If you have some people, even with their best intentions, that are not doing their part, then ultimately, overall, the impact is lessened. So even though it might be too late, it's better than nothing, and it's really one of the only tools we have at the moment, in addition to fortifying our public health care infrastructure and also working on these vaccines. But we have to have this part of the toolkit now, and we need to work with what we have at the moment and learn from this going forward in the future.
You were saying playing catch-up. Joshua Gans, a professor of strategic management at the University of Toronto, is out with a really interesting publication. He's talking about much of what you're saying, and he says right now one of the important distinctions that China did that West doesn't seem to get is dramatically increasing healthcare capacity. Of course, we saw those hospitals go up really quickly in Wuhan. He says, wouldn't it have been nice if Italy had jumped on that a couple of weeks ago? Is that something that the U.S. and the U.K. and other countries should be thinking about right now?
Absolutely. We have limited resources, and that's understood. And if we need to prioritize where those resources and personnel and time and money and private-public collaborations are going to go, then it needs to be in fortifying the public healthcare infrastructure. And the reason for that is we know the virus is out there, we know it's going to infect a certain number of people, and we know the spectrum of infection is going to range from mild to severe, and 5% of those cases will be critically ill, and then we can have a range of what that number is going to look like. Based on that, based on the worst case scenario, we can really fortify our infrastructure and ensure that those people that end up in that 5% of needing critical care get the care that they deserve. And that is something we need to be paying attention to and prioritizing now at this stage in the game. If we had more time to have also administered other strategies, that would have been ideal, but ultimately, given where we are, and other countries can learn from this, it's about increasing capacity.
Yeah, let's hope they jump on it. Sweta, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.